What is up, guys? So today we are back with another deep dive. Actually, today is our last full deep dive for the Nightmare Cup. I'm gonna feel really stupid if the announcement doesn't go as planned and maybe doesn't get announced on Saturday. I'm gonna feel really dumb. But anyways, so today should be the final deep dive that we do for the Nightmare Cup. Tomorrow and Sunday there are gonna be two versus videos again for this weekend. I will make a cup announcement video on Saturday as soon as they announce the cup. We'll talk a little bit about the numbers. Of course, I'll already have the spreadsheet ready, and we'll have all that stuff squared away. And then we'll start, deep diving from there. I'm so excited, but I don't want the reason that I'm super excited to come off as I'm tired of the Nightmare Cup, because while that is a issue, yes, I am getting tired of the Nightmare Cup. I feel like we've talked about most of the noteworthy Pokemon, and if we haven't talked about them, then they're going to remain a secret to most people. But I have some big changes that are going to be coming for the next month's cup. The way that I do deep dives is going to shift a little bit. I'm going to try to start including the actual simulations on screen with you guys so that you guys can see what's actually going on, and try to do a couple of different things in that aspect, just trying to spruce up a little bit of the content so that it, one, looks nicer, and two, hopefully can be more informative with more visual aid for you guys as well. So without further ado, let's actually get into our subject today, and I'm not gonna lie, I chose Wobbuffet to be our last Pokemon, just kind of for the meme. So, Wobbuffet is a pure Psychic type Pokemon, maxing out at level 40 with 15s across the board at only 1,026. So, while I usually say that we want to keep our CP like relatively close to that 1500 mark so we can get a big portion of our stat product out of the Pokemon, being that far under is kind of not what I'm referencing there. Definitely not super impressed with the CP scale, but if you do have 15s, I legit wrote that on my notes. So if you do have a 15 on attack, 15 defense, and 15 stamina at level 40, you can achieve that 1,026. So according to my spreadsheets and all the numbers that I have, Wobbuffet should actually rank 2nd in bulk and 18th in stat product. And all of that is due to his base stats with a whopping 60 on attack. Like, holy cow, that's extremely low. Defense at 106 and stamina at 382. Holy cow, is that stamina beautiful. And honestly, like, this stat spread, while most of it is truncated into the HP stat, we do have a really low attack, and then our defense and stamina are both higher, so it is a more ideal spread. But if he did have a little bit more defense and a little less stamina, maybe it would work out in a more unique way in some situations. But basically, he has a gigantic HP pool, which is great. Next, moving on to our moves here. So we actually only have 3 moves total. So he has 2 fast moves, and Mirror Coat is his only charge move, which sucks. But Kelter, as we know, is an amazing move all in itself. 3.5 energy per turn, 4 damage per turn. Very nice there. Splash here, 3 energy per turn for 0 damage per turn. See, I kind of like put this question mark there because everything that I know about the damage formula means that we'll at least get 1 damage per turn, which means that 0 is technically not possible. Like, even then it would be like, what, half a damage per turn or something like that. Like, it would at least result in at least 1 damage, but then that damage would be divided about amongst the duration of that move in turns. Like, I'm sure that, like, effectively it's like having 0 damage, but it at least has to do 1 damage, right? Then we have Mirror Coat here, costing 55 energy for 60 damage at a 1.09 damage per energy ratio. Not hitting on a whole lot. After we do factor in stab, because it actually is a Psychic type move, we do get 72 damage for a 1.31 damage per energy ratio. Okay, so I guess the big question is, do you choose Counter or Splash? I'll let you guys decide. Counter? Great, I'm glad you chose Counter. So with Counter and Mirror Coat, we actually do have a somewhat viable moveset. It's very narrow, as you can imagine. Only having one freaking charge move really does suck. But we do have a couple of things that we can actually do with Wobbuffet in our scenario here. So let's actually talk about some shields to go over what this moveset actually can do. In our first scenario is a 0 versus 0, which is kind of like our mock-up like closing situation when I have no shields, neither does my opponent have any shields. 31.3% is okay. I mean, that's almost the full typing of a one single type, so at least a third of the cup, so to speak, could go down to us. Not too shabby. Our next scenario is actually a 2 versus 0, so when I have 2 shields, my opponent doesn't have any shields, we actually end up winning 71.6% of those. And I'm actually not too concerned about the ones that we win. I actually want to know which ones we just flat out lose to. The reason is because if we have complete shield advantage, I'm actually looking at what are basically the hard counters for our Wobbuffet here. And to no surprise, there's a lot of darks in here. So Spiritomb, Umbreon, Alolan Muck, Mr. Mime, Alolan Grimer, Hypno, Skuntank, Grumpig, Drapion, Chimecho, Lunatone, Solrock, Bronzong, Alolan Raichu, Xatu. A lot. There's a lot of things that can just flat out end up beating us. It comes down to the things that just don't necessarily care about counter. Because counter is basically our one and only saving grace, Mirror Coat is basically like a win more, which is really weird to say, but it's almost like a win more move for us because it's not like it's amazing. It's just kind of thrown in there as a, here you go, you need at least one of these. Things that just don't care about counter don't really care about us, to be honest. If you can overcome the counter damage, then you've pretty much got a pretty good chance going up against Wobbuffet here. Our next shield scenario is actually this 0 versus 2, which is where I don't have any shields and my opponent actually has 2 shields. We actually end up winning 10.4% of these matchups. Now, unlike the last situation, I actually do care about which ones we're actually winning up against here because I want to know which Pokemon that Wobbuffet could be considered a hard counter for. While there's no like blatant like amazing matchups, the best matchup that we do actually have is against Machop, which isn't even like super good. Machoke is in there as well, and then we start to get into Sneasel, Weavile, which both have a quad weakness to our counter move, and then Girafarig shows up here, Drowsy, Hitmonlee, and that's it. That's all we win against. So a very, very select few Pokemon, and none of them are really like amazingly noteworthy. Some of them could see a little bit of play. Like I remember Sneasel being an early contender for a couple of things. Maybe somebody's going to be rocking the Sneasel, but are you really going to be rocking this Wobbuffet? Maybe after this video you could have decided to actually rock it, which would be really cool. Our last scenario here is our 2 versus 2, which is where I have 2 shields, my opponent has 2 shields, or the mock-up like opening type situation. We actually do end up winning 46.3% of these, which is not too bad. So what does that tell us? Well, it definitely says that we want to open more than we want to close. Statistically, we're going to win more if we open rather than if we close. So now let's actually get into a few matchups with Wobbuffet here. I do want to remind you that everything ran on this board as far as the simulations go are taking into account a 1 versus 1 shield scenario to try to give evenness to both Pokemon. And in all of the deep dives, I ended up taking our subject Pokemon, Wobbuffet, today, and I put them up against the top 10 bulkiest Pokemon in the cup just to kind of see how they do. Well, Wobbuffet is not really hitting on a whole lot. Alolan Raticate is the only Pokemon that we win out of the top 10. Being that Wobbuffet is actually included in this top 10, I did not do the mirror match. I actually just include Poliwrath, considering he's the 11th bulkiest Pokemon. So Umbreon, Hypno, Claydol, Bronzong, yes with both moves. Metang, Slowbro, Slowking, Grumpig, and Poliwrath all have their way with Wobbuffet. They do not care about counter damage. They do not care about the Mirror Coat damage. They just can blatantly tear through us. This little section here is to talk about what should we actually be focusing our attention on with Wobbuffet versus what should we bring to the table to actually combat the Wobbuffet. Well, as far as what we should focus our attention on, honestly, the fighters really end up being our only good target here. So I do have the fighting typing minus Lucario, Heracross, and Poliwrath. Those three are the only ones that actually end up beating the Wobbuffet in the 1v1 shield scenario. So Poliwrath is the worst one for us to go up against, Heracross is second, and Lucario is actually our third hardest match. Then from there, we start to win. Gallade is a really close match, Hariyama is a really close match, Monferno, Combusken, Infernape, Blaziken, Breloom, and it's just getting easier and easier here. Toxicroak actually pretty easy. It's not like a super easy battle, but I mean, he is quad weak to that mirror coat there, so kind of does end up giving him a run for his money. Now let's actually talk about what should we bring to the table to combat the Wobbuffet. Well, so Wobbuffet isn't necessarily like clean cut and dry. It's not like he only wins up against the dark types. He doesn't only win up against the fightings. He doesn't only win up against the psychics. He has a couple of matchups in each typing that really either gives him trouble or gives him no trouble. In the psychic, he only has 4 wins here. Girafarig, Drowsy, Gallade, and Smoochum are his only wins. Now, he does have a couple of ties with Jinx and himself, but after that, it just gets really, really messy. Metang, Kadabra, Espeon, Slowpoke, Metagross, Bronzong, Slowking, Claydol. Yeah, Grumpig is actually the worst matchup in the 1v1 shield scenario for our little Wobbuffet here. Next, we actually move into the dark types, and in the dark types, we only actually end up winning 7 of these. And a lot of them, the majority of these 7 are actually quad weak to our counter, so they're caring a lot about the fast move damage here. Sneasel, Weavile, Tyranitar, and Alolan Raticate all end up losing to us. And the one thing they all 4 have in common is a quad weakness to fighting. Then we run into Sharpedo, Crawdaunt, and Nuzleaf, which actually can end up being a positive matchup for us. Then we actually have a tie up against Absol, and then it just goes downhill from there. Houndoom, Mightyena, Persian, Skuntank, Drapion, Muk, Honchkrow, Umbreon, Murkrow, and Spiritomb is actually the best counter in the dark types up against our Wobbuffet here. You might be sitting there thinking, oh, well, he's about to go over these pros and cons. Yeah. So, my only con is that Wobbuffet honestly just feels like a meme. So, super low CP. Super insane stat product right here. But, it's just... Let's say in a weird scenario you have 5 members on your team, you don't think you're going to be using a 6 because your 5 slots are like really powerful Pokemon, and you're like, I just need to throw in a Pokemon to scare some people off. Hey, if you want to throw Wobbuffet on there and make your opponent scratch their head, by all means, it would be good for that. But honestly, in battle, unless you, for some reason, already have these 3 fightings covered, and you don't care so much as, or you need, I guess, these 11 Pokemon right here covered, I guess you could go with Wobbuffet, but seriously, don't. There are way better psychic types out there, way more flexibility, and way better options for you. But on the pro side, it is a great meme. I mean, ultimate memes, say no more. Literally, if you took this into battle, your opponent is going to be like, holy cow, that's a Wobbuffet. What do I even do? It's not got a whole lot going for it. It is an ultimate laugh factor, but outside of that, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of chance for Wobbuffet to stand, even though he does have 4 feet, because that's not a foot, right? Thank you guys so much for hanging out the entire Nightmare Cup. Thank you so much for watching the deep dives. I'm really, really looking forward to next month, only because I'm excited to talk about new Pokemon rather than the same ones that we've been talking about in a different scenario, a different setting, if you will. And I'm excited for the changes that I'm going to be making, so hopefully you guys will stick around for next month. And until our next video, always remember, if you like to like videos, you can do that. But if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below. And until our next video, We will catch you then.